Yeah, so I mean, I just was thinking more like conversational, informal. I don't really have any specific topics. I'm
Okay.
going to kind of like use this last call to just go over like overall like working like the past like 6 months plus, and then just kind of giving like an overall idea of like what you think I could be doing like moving forward,
Yep.
and then also like hearing more about like what's worked for you as far as like growth. You know what I'm
Yep.
saying? Like from where I am right now, like, or when you were like around my scale to fast forward, like kind of like where you're at right now, and kind of like some
So
of
like
the
where we're
positives.
just getting this is just what I hear you saying right now. It just
Yeah.
makes me think of one thing that
Okay.
I want to say before I forget.
Yeah.
Where we're at right now, coming up on 2,000 units. It's finally, from a management standpoint, we're finally starting to be like, okay, we're starting to get scale,
Mhm.
where now you're seeing a little bit excess, even with the infrastructure, so that we can now go out and get more infrastructure to be able to take on more special projects or start to hire even on the acquisition side and stuff like that,
Mhm.
without having to infuse a lot of capital in, right, just from the cash flow of the management company, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So we're starting to see that a little bit, but then also what we've changed a little bit too is we've changed our asset management fee. I can't remember if I told you this or not. We've changed that to go from 1/4%
So like 1%.
to 1%.
Mhm.
And basically we're taking a good chunk of that to be able to start allocating towards more like potentially asset managers, people more on the acquisition side and stuff like that, to be able to
Okay.
give us more bandwidth, right? Because right now my bandwidth is getting tied up too, being the CEO, president of what we're doing here. So I need help, like as far as like an analyst to help,
Mhm.
do some of that stuff, right? Because Ava doesn't necessarily have the bandwidth to do that either. Our controller, right?
Mhm.
So, so that's, I think, for you to realize. I know we've always talked about this a lot, and this has been the struggle. This was the struggle early on for us, and it's still been the struggle. And again, each property that you bite off, because you get more scale, it gets a little bit easier.
Mhm.
But it's okay. How do we build this infrastructure if we're gonna manage in house, or how do we build the infrastructure as far as like if we're not managing in house, but then how are we going out to get a team that can get the investor dollars that we need to chase, or the deal flow.
Mhm.
So
So real quick on that same point. So, as you have different sectors of your business, right? You have your property management company, your acquisitions company. So you're basically saying on your acquisition side, you're allocating some of the dollars for the asset management fee
To
to
be able
go
to
to
hire.
work people.
whether it's asset managers, but yeah, basically, and how we're gonna run it is we'll still run it through Spaulding Group,
Mhm.
but the GP groups they're gonna essentially pay back for those salaries, right? So it's kind of like what we're doing at the property management level,
Mhm.
but now we're doing it kind of at the asset management level, the GP type level almost. But
Mhm.
for us, because of the scale with where we have our people sitting already, it makes sense to still have them be Spaulding Group employees, right?
Okay.
A lot of different ways to do that, but
Okay.
that's how we're gonna do it.
Mhm.
So at least that's the plan right now.
Okay. So I mean, this is kind of like what's needed at 13 coming on 17 plus 100 units, right? Or was this something that you wish that you may have done earlier?
We couldn't have done it earlier unless I would have taken X sum of capital and invested it and infused it in the company, right? Because we wouldn't have had that cash flow to be able to necessarily do it,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. Okay. So I guess as far as like the properties and everything, right? I think we talked about this before too. Like as far as like the locations of them.
Yep.
You think that's an issue, like with them being
Well,
far apart?
so anytime, I don't think I think that you have to be able to go to areas that are desirable and you want to be in, and where there's deals and whatnot, right? I don't think we can't to an extent, like obviously on the deal flow end, right? The
Mhm.
wider if you're looking worldwide or universe wide or whatever, right? You got more options,
Mhm.
right? If you have more money, you have more options.
Mhm.
But then from an operations side, the more scattered you are,
Mhm.
the more time it's going to take each individual that's working in a portfolio or whatever, if they're on-site operations, to be able to get to those places, right? So now theoretically, you're going to need more people,
Mhm.
or it's more of a challenge because of the spread, right, to get to them.
Gotcha,
Right? It's the same.
gotcha.
It's the same thing that the people that argue with you or I, being multifamily guys who are like, okay, we would love to be able to buy 400 units in one spot.
Mhm.
The guy that's going out and buying 100 single-family homes that are all over the place within a 30-mile radius, shotgun, he's never going to understand what we're doing because he doesn't understand how much easier it is to manage those 400 units that are in one spot than the 100 houses. Even though there's 300 more units here at the 400, that's still easier to manage than the 100 houses that guy has that's shotgunned within a half-hour radius, right?
100 different yards,
so
100 different routes.
So you take that with one property, but now the same thing applies geographically as well, right? So like Cortland is a huge company, right? That 80,000 apartments or whatever. They don't even go into a market unless they can get something like around 3,000 to 5,000 units relatively quick, because again they want the scale in that area because they know if they're just shotgunned throughout the country, they, for their model, it's not, and for efficiencies, right? It's just not, it's not as advantageous and it's harder. It's more pain in the butt. You're not getting as much bang for your buck with your human capital. That makes sense?
No, it does. It does. Yeah. So basically, each group is going to have its own opinion on how things are going to be ran, and you're basically saying, the way we approach stuff, someone who is looking at it, from that perspective wouldn't kind of be able to see eye to eye on it.
I mean, this is what I think. I think anyone that's actually truly got the biggest and best business, they understand scale, and that's like the only opinion in my mind. Right? Now, there is still a million ways to play the game, and you can still win doing it different ways, but no doubt about it, the easiest and best way to do it is scale, right? And as much as you can get in a smaller area.
Gotcha.
Ideally, right? But again, now it's like, now you have the question of, okay, with where I'm at, where I'm located, is there enough, right? Or is there, so how far will I have to go if my goal is X amount of units? If I'm in X spot, what other towns will I have to go to? Are those towns appealing, right? Because you still want to be buying in the right locations. I still feel like we're buying in the right locations. Now that's a more of an opinionated thing, because you talk to Grant Cardone and be like, he'd never buy in Janesville, Wisconsin.
That was going to be my follow-up question for you. Like, what do you say to the operators that are, only focused on primary markets?
So I think there's a trade-off. What's the trade-off? Well, the properties that he has, right? He's in Miami, Florida, so day one his cash flow might be 3% to 7% cash on cash, right? And to an investors it might be like 5%. It might be a lot smaller, right? I mean, I don't know if they have a preferred return or not, but he might not be hitting the pref year one. Right? Or year 2 or year 3. Their big bang is on the back end, right? Because of the amount of buyers they have in those markets, right? So it's a trade-off. Now, how much capital do you need, right? And this is our big-time investors that write $1 million to $8 million checks. They look at this. They look at guys that are coming and investing with us from California and Florida and Texas and New York, whatever. They look at the trade-off is we're getting so much more cash flow here day one. They are accepting the risk of, not even potentially, they're accepting the risk of less buyers for Janesville, Wisconsin, in Madison, Wisconsin, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin, less buyers there potentially than Miami, right? But they're okay with it because year one we're getting 8% to 10%, right? Gotcha. And then year two we're up to 9% to 11.5% versus, so they're getting more cash on cash day one.
Yes.
Right, which in the people that are investing with us, in their mind, and for me, it makes sense, right? For sure. So I mean, either like it's almost like a catch-22. Like, the secondary markets, it may not have as aggressive as appreciation as the primary, right? But then, and it's to be determined, right? It's to be determined, because like my mindset is, I think that the markets that I'm in, I think that there are going to be more institutional national players come into these markets over the next 10 years. I really believe that. Because
the yield that they're chasing, they can't achieve in the market.
A great first example of that is a couple of the companies that have already come in, but another example is, because there already are starting to be national companies come in here, but the other example is 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, I was never going to get these California or Florida or New York or Texas, Washington, some of these guys that are invested with us, I wouldn't have got their dollars a couple years ago. Part of that could be because of my experience, but also I don't think I would have, because I think that they still would have been investing in other places. And now they're viewing it as a great opportunity because we still have the cash flow here.
Got you. So at what point are you looking at possibly going out of Wisconsin, or is it like, if it's not broke, don't fix it? I mean, if it's
Well, so then for me is like right now, like when I look at deals in Florida and Wisconsin, it's like hard for me right now to bite off in Florida because I look at how much less the cash on cash is compared to what our investors are used to seeing up here in Wisconsin, right? So I think part of that is just because like I know Wisconsin, I get a lot of the deals off market before they hit the market here, right? So I have huge advantages of playing here.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, we'll get in our markets, just a matter of when,
Yes.
right? And I feel like we'll be closer to like 5,000 units before we leave the state.
Gotcha.
That's kind of what I feel like.
Makes sense.
Because if we just keep, like, we still truly haven't hit like huge scale here yet.
Mm-hmm.
2,000 units still isn't like huge scale. It's not
really, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I said, Cortland doesn't look to go into a market unless they can get 3,000 to 5,000 units like right away. Like within a year and a half, 2 years is their business plan to be able to get, just from like what I've read and picked up from pieces here and there. Not that I've seen their actual business plan, but I pay attention to what they're doing.
Yeah.
Right? So, and that's just one market.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I'm like, we're still a super, super, super small fish, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, there's still a lot that we can bite off here.
Mm-hmm.
Where I have a lot of opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
And then having this footprint here is almost like, you know, you can get leads coming to you, or like the reputation kind of helps with that as well. Like when you're trying to source deals as well,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, but then also like when I start to jump further locations, okay, now I have another question. Now I have more questions to answer about our own company. Are we going to self-manage those assets? Are we going to be in markets where there are better there's no third-party manager in this area that I'd really want managing my stuff,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I don't feel like they can execute the business plan the way that we can.
Mm-hmm.
So when we leave, okay, well, what's the strategy?
Mm-hmm.
Are we gonna self-manage at those locations? Or are we gonna be in a location where there's a wider variety of third-party managers
Mm-hmm.
that can execute our business plan? You know, when you're buying some of the Class A stuff, I think some of those business plans are a little bit easier so there's probably better managers and more for them. But I think some of this value-add stuff, I think it has to be. I mean, you know, the
Mm-hmm.
struggles, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And some of the issues with managing these properties in some of these secondary and tertiary markets,
Mm-hmm.
if it's someone that doesn't have a vested interest, there's so much going on that a lot of balls can get dropped,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that we just have to weigh that at that point. I don't necessarily have the answers.
Makes sense.
But yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. So, you know, being so young, right? 32?
What are you, 28?
28, yeah.
That's what I thought.
Being like so young, like, what have been some things that you think have, you know, helped you get tremendous success and just growth, you know, at your age, like so early on in your career, like, you know?
I talk about this all the time online, right?
Uh-huh.
Compressing the amount of time between an idea and taking action toward that idea.
Okay.
Right? And like I'll tell people all the time, like I get more done on a Monday morning from 6 or 7 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting my own home office 6 or 7 a.m. until noon, than literally most people are going to get done in a month or 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I'm in a task and I'm going to bang it out, right? And so I, you know, between idea
Mm-hmm.
and going for it,
Mm-hmm.
so many people have such a huge time gap where like I need to get my marketing right, man. I need to get my logo done. Like, the logo was like our logo still had like we're just now looking to start. You know, we've had the conversation with a couple companies of putting big dollars behind like our brand, and again, branding's huge,
Mm-hmm.
but like. And I'm a great example of that because of what I'm doing through Instagram and social media.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also a great example of it all doesn't have to be perfect, and you don't need everything to be in line.
Mm-hmm.
And don't think you have to, because you're starting at zero today, you have this idea to execute. It shouldn't take a year and a half to get everything in place to go execute,
Mm-hmm.
right? So how short can you go from idea to executing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if you can make that 3 hours or 2 hours or 5 minutes or 2 minutes or 1 minute or 30 seconds is going to be better than the guy that waits 2 months,
Mm-hmm.
right? Danny and I talk about this all the time. I talk about this a lot with people too, is a lot of times I'll pick the wrong idea out of the gate of something that I want to go do, and I'll find 4 ways not to do it, but then the 5th way is the right way to do it, and a lot of times it doesn't take me 5 swings of the bat. Usually it's 1 or 2 or 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I can be wrong the first couple times and then adjust, find the right way to do something, start crushing it, before the other guys even made a decision on what to do, because just sitting there, what should I do? He doesn't want to make a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
We make mistakes around here all the time.
Yeah, it's a
Right?
part of it, right? Part of growing.
But then you learn, and then you, right, and like that's how you learn, right? And so the best way to learn is obviously from someone else and seeing someone else's, so you don't have to go through that pain.
Mm-hmm.
But also when you're doing things that not a lot of people are doing, you're gonna have to experience some of that pain yourself, and then be able to adjust, adapt, and figure it out going forward.
Okay, so in that same type of conversation, right? Like, looking back, right? I mean, it's a lot of things you did great, right? Is there anything that you would have changed, or like looking in retrospect, done anything differently, or you think
I would have tried to buy bigger deals earlier if I could look back now, and obviously I would have bought probably 80% of the deals I looked at. Right?
Yeah.
Now, can I just start doing that today? No, because again, it's easy to be a Monday morning quarterback.
Yeah.
So there's not really anything that I would change.
Okay.
Because like, would I bought more deals? Yeah, but it's so easy to say. But if we would have gone through the worst 5-year period ever, I would be like, well, I made all the right decisions, right? So it's so easy for everyone to be a Monday morning quarterback. That I think the biggest thing is, instead of sitting there wishing what you would have done, okay, what do you want to do? And now again, how do you shorten the time between idea to going out and implementing and doing it? Do it now. Don't wait a day.
Yeah.
Don't wait 4 days. Don't wait a month. Don't wait a year. I think that's bigger and better than looking back and what could I have done, right? If you're looking back and saying what could I or should I have done, and you still think that might be the right idea, well then you better do it now, and don't wait a month. Don't wait a year. Right?
Love it. Yeah, that makes sense. So like, I guess looking forward, right? I mean, with all the things that we are experiencing right now in the market right now, right? Like, are you pivoting any, like, as far as like where interest rates are and stuff, looking at newer acquisitions, or how are you, preparing, your company and everything for like the uncertainty, that's coming up in the market?
So we closed 460 units here in the middle of August. We haven't even rate locked that yet. Rates have come down since we initially started looking at it. So like right now it's a little under. If we rate lock today, it'd be a little bit under the interest rate that I projected. But we probably should be rate locking in the next like 7 days. So we're going to kind of see what happens with that, right? I'm still in the ballpark. The good thing is rates really haven't, I've still underwritten the deal at a great rate, or a rate that's higher than what we're at right now. And on top of that, rents have still gone up, right? That being said, like, this is still a good time for us to kind of hit pause just a little bit. Like, I'm looking about a handful of deals this week. I'm probably looking at a dozen deals total this week. So it's not that I'm not looking, but also I'm okay if we hit pause for like 2 or 3 months right now, because I was just talking to Robert Martinez last night. I think you follow him, right? Yeah. He was talking about, he was like, thank you for the support that you show, and appreciate you. And he was talking about what they've kind of accomplished, how much equity they've raised units. I'm like, dang, like, us too. Like, we've almost closed since January 2021. We've almost closed on like 1,300 units. We've raised like $50 million, and the deal amount is like 190 million or something like that, 160 million, right? Yeah. So I look at that and I'm like, right now, because of the a little bit more of uncertainty, I'm still going to look at deals. If I find some, I'm still pulling triggers, because I'm still investing on such a long-term mindset that if we can invest in a way where the deal still is flat or goes down a little bit or whatever, but we don't run into the risk of having to refinance at the wrong time or whatever, and if I can truly be in a deal for 30 years, 20 years, 15 years, 10, if I'm not looking in just the 2-year window, I'm going to be all right? So if I find a deal like that, I'm still going to run with it and pull a trigger on it. Right? While everyone else is scared and whatnot. Just like this deal. We closed the deal. We closed the 372 unit deal. Everyone's like starting to get scared about what's going on as we close that deal. The next day I landed 460 units because I believed that over the next 10, 15, 20 years it's going to be a great deal. Our plan isn't to necessarily hold it that long, but would I be okay if we had to? Yeah, I would be. And it's going to work, right? So I'm not getting into a situation where we have to sell it in 2 years, right? We're putting 10-year debt on it, right?
Like agency or?
Yeah, we want agency on that one. So, so I think, but now that being said too, like the 372 unit deal, that's a floating rate.
Okay.
So we're adjustable. We're floating that we just closed in May.
Okay.
But again, our spread is so small. It's still a 3-year deal plus some extensions, right? And I just look at, again, we bought it off market, so we didn't have other competition. I'm still in the mindset of, we bought it for 40, 41. I'm still in the mindset now that it's still, when we bought it, I'm like, someone will pay 48, 49 for this. Would they still pay 48, 49 for it right now? Probably not. Would they still pay 45 to 47? Absolutely. 100. I don't even have a doubt in my mind that we could sell it like that. So I'm still looking for deals like that.
Okay.
Right? And I'll still pull it. But if we have to put pause on things right now, I'm also okay with that, because right now we're also still getting caught up in our operations. A lot of the people you see in the hallways have been here for 4 days now.
Really? Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So like we're still like
Not
you
even.
didn't even notice. Yeah, not even. Some of them not even. April, who just introduced you, she's been here. This is her first day.
Oh wow.
She's one of our second regional manager, right?
She did great. I mean,
So like so this is a good time for us as well to just okay, well we can take 6 weeks, we can take 8, like, and let's catch up. Let's let our operations catch up a little bit. Let's get our team built, right? We got another, I don't know, I think we're trying to hire like another 10 people yet right now, right? So let's get those 10 to 15 people hired. Let's move forward and let's get everything rocking and rolling. And you know, I kind of look at it like COVID a little bit. Everyone took kind of a pause, right? Well, now looking back, everyone's like, well, I should have bought more.
yeah.
Right? Which I feel like ultimately for the next 7 years, we're all going to say the same thing. That even right now, people should be buying like crazy.